The Grand Meridian Hotel in Chicago stood 62 floors above the city like a monument to everything money could buy.
I can't believe this is
Its
happening.
marble floors
What am I
reflected
supposed to do
chandeliers
now?
worth more than most
I
people's
need to figure
homes.
this out.
Its hallways
Hey,
smelled
buddy,
of
it's
fresh
okay.
roses and
It's so
expensive cologne.
loud.
I know,
Every
I'm right
guest who
here.
walked through its
Okay.
golden revolving doors carried either a title, a fortune, or both. On the 14th floor, in Suite 1408, the presidential suite, Daniel Hargrove was losing his mind. Not in the dramatic, headline-making way that billionaires sometimes did. No. This was quieter. More personal. More devastating. His 7-year-old son, Ethan, had been screaming for 43 minutes. Daniel Hargrove was worth $4.2 billion. He owned 3 tech companies, a private island off the coast of Florida, and a penthouse in Manhattan with views that made grown men weep. He had negotiated with presidents, outmaneuvered Wall Street sharks, and built an empire from a college dorm room with nothing but a second-hand laptop and an obsessive work ethic. But none of that, not a single dollar, not a single victory, had ever prepared him for fatherhood. And especially not for this kind of fatherhood. Ethan had been diagnosed with severe autism at age 3. Nonverbal for most of his life. He communicated through gestures, sounds, and a small tablet device loaded with picture symbols. He was brilliant in ways that broke Daniel's heart, capable of solving complex puzzles in minutes, able to memorize entire city maps after a single glance. But the world outside his carefully structured routines was a war zone. For his nervous system, travel was the worst. They had flown in from New York that morning for Daniel's quarterly board meeting. His ex-wife, Claire, usually managed Ethan's schedule. But she was in London for surgery, nothing serious, she'd said, but serious enough to keep her away for 2 weeks. So Daniel had hired a specialist behavioral aide, a woman named Dr. Patricia Walsh, to travel with them. Patricia had lasted exactly 4 hours. She'd quit at noon, citing a family emergency, leaving Daniel alone in the suite with Ethan. 3 unopened briefing folders, a board meeting in 6 hours, and no idea what to do. The hotel had changed something. That was the problem. Ethan's usual routine at home involved specific textures, specific lighting, a specific blue blanket that went everywhere with him. But in the chaos of packing, Daniel's assistant had packed, actually. Because Daniel had been on a call, the blue blanket had been left behind. Without it, Ethan was untethered. He sat in the corner of the living room, pressed between the cream-colored sofa and the wall, rocking back and forth with his knees pulled to his chest. His noise-canceling headphones, thank God those had made it into the bag, were clamped over his ears, but they weren't enough today. His face was red and wet. His hands covered his eyes. And from somewhere deep inside him came a sound that wasn't quite crying and wasn't quite screaming. It was something in between. Something raw and primal. The sound of a small person completely overwhelmed by a world that made no sense to him. Daniel knelt on the floor 3 feet away, close enough to be present, far enough not to crowd him. Claire had taught him that. Don't touch during a meltdown unless he reaches for you. Don't talk too much. Don't try to fix it. Just be there. Hey, buddy, Daniel said softly. I'm right here. You're safe. Ethan rocked harder. I know this place is different. I know it doesn't smell right. I know, Daniel's voice cracked. He pressed his fingers to his eyes for a moment. I'm sorry about the blanket, okay? I'm sorry. That was my fault. Nothing. Daniel reached for the tablet on the coffee table and slid it gently across the floor toward Ethan. Ethan glanced at it once, then looked away, pulling his knees tighter. From the hallway came the muffled sound of a guest walking past, a phone ringing somewhere distant, the soft mechanical hum of the hotel's ventilation system. To Daniel, these sounds were white noise. To Ethan, they were apparently unbearable. The screaming intensified. Daniel stood up and walked to the window. Chicago spread out below him in all its gray and glittering winter beauty. He pressed his forehead against the cold glass and closed his eyes. "What do I do?" he had called Claire. Voicemail. He had called his assistant. Useless. He had Googled autism meltdown. Hotel and gotten a dozen articles he didn't have time to read. He had room service send up Ethan's favorite food, plain buttered pasta. No sauce, no garnish, and it sat untouched on the coffee table. Going cold. A knock at the door made him flinch. He crossed the suite and opened it. Expecting the floor manager again, they'd already called twice. Politely but pointedly asking if everything was all right in 1408. But it wasn't the floor manager. It was a maid. She was perhaps 55, maybe 60, it was hard to tell. A small woman with warm brown skin and silver-streaked hair pulled back beneath the hotel's standard white cap. Her uniform was crisp and neat. Her cart stood behind her in the hallway, loaded with fresh towels and cleaning supplies. She wore no name tag, or rather, her name tag had slipped sideways so he couldn't read it. She looked past Daniel into the suite, toward the sound of Ethan's distress. And her expression did something he hadn't expected. It didn't tighten with discomfort. It didn't flash with judgment or impatience. It simply softened. "Sir," she said, her voice low and steady, "I'm here to turn down the room." But, she paused. "Is the child all right?" "He's fine," Daniel said automatically, the billionaire's reflex. "We're fine. Everything is fine. We don't need turn-down service right now, thank you." He started to close the door. "My grandson has autism," the woman said quietly. Daniel stopped. She wasn't looking at him. She was looking past him, toward Ethan, with an expression of complete recognition. The look of someone who had sat on that floor herself. In her own version of this room. In her own version of this helplessness. "His name is Marcus," she continued. "He's 9. Nonverbal." She met Daniel's eyes. "I know what that sound means." Daniel stared at her for a long moment. Then he opened the door all the way and stepped aside. Her name, he would learn later, was Rose. Rose Delgado. She had worked at the Grand Meridian for 11 years. Starting as a part-time housekeeper and working her way to senior staff. She was the kind of employee hotels depended on and rarely noticed, steady. Invisible, essential. She didn't rush in. She didn't make any sudden movements. She set her cart quietly in the hallway, stepped into the suite, and stood completely still just inside the doorway, letting the room adjust to her presence. Ethan, still in his corner, still rocking, opened his eyes a fraction. Rose crouched down, not walking toward him, just lowering herself to his level from across the room. She reached into the pocket of her uniform and produced something small. Daniel squinted to see what it was. A smooth, dark stone. Small enough to fit in a child's palm. Polished like sea glass. She set it on the floor and slid it gently toward Ethan. The same way you might offer food to a frightened animal, slowly. Without demand, without expectation. The stone stopped a foot away from him. Ethan's rocking slowed, almost imperceptibly. He stared at the stone. Rose began to hum. Softly, barely audible. Something without words, a low, rhythmic sound. Almost like a lullaby but not quite. More like breathing turned into music. Steady. Unhurried. Daniel stood by the window and did not move and did not speak because something was happening in the room that he didn't understand. But didn't dare interrupt. 2 minutes passed. Maybe 3. Ethan uncurled one hand from around his knees. Slowly, so slowly, his fingers reached toward the stone. He picked it up. He turned it over in his palm, feeling its edges, its weight, its temperature. His rocking slowed further. His breathing, which had been ragged and sharp, began to deepen. Rose kept humming. Another minute passed. Ethan looked up at her. Rose smiled, not a big, performative smile. Not the kind of smile adults aimed at children like a weapon of forced cheerfulness. Just a small, quiet smile. I see you. You're okay. And then, impossibly, heartbreakingly, Ethan's shoulders dropped. The screaming stopped. The silence that replaced. It was the most beautiful thing Daniel Hargrove had ever heard in his 41 years on Earth. Ethan didn't speak. He never did. But he held the stone and he looked at Rose with calm, dark eyes. And eventually he allowed her to sit cross-legged on the floor 4 feet away from him. And they existed together in that quiet while. Daniel stood at the window with his hand over his mouth, not trusting himself to move or speak or breathe too loudly. After a while, Rose spoke, not to Ethan, exactly, but in his general direction, in a soft, even tone. Marcus loves stones too, she said. He has a whole jar of them at home. Every color. She paused. He also hates new places. Hotels especially. The smell bothers him. She glanced at the air vent on the ceiling. These vents put out a chemical smell, cleaning solution. I can adjust the airflow from the panel by the door. It helps sometimes. She looked at Daniel. He nodded, not trusting his voice. She rose quietly, adjusted something on the climate panel by the entrance. And the faint hum of the ventilation shifted. A moment later the air in the room felt different. Fresher. Less sharp. Ethan inhaled. His body relaxed another degree. Also, Rose said, still quietly. The lighting in these suites, there's a warm setting on the lamp panel. The cool white light is harder on sensitive eyes. She moved to the lamp panel and adjusted it. The room shifted from bright clinical white to a softer amber tone. It was like watching someone tune an instrument. The sofa cushion covers are a scratchy fabric, she continued. Almost to herself. Moving to the sofa and flipping 2 cushions over so their smooth backing faced up. Some children do better with smoother textures. She paused, looked at Ethan, who was watching her now with open curiosity. You're very smart, she told him simply. This hotel isn't made for people like you. That's the hotel's fault, not yours. Ethan blinked. Then, with a movement so small Daniel almost missed it, his son nodded. Daniel found his voice eventually. How long have you, he started. 11 years, Rose said. Here. But Marcus, 9 years. His parents. My daughter, Rose said, her voice steady but carrying something underneath it. She's a single mother. Works nights. So I take Marcus on weekends. A small pause. I've learned a lot of things. Daniel looked at this woman, this hotel maid in her neat uniform with her cart in the hallway and her smooth stone and her quiet wisdom. And felt something shift in his chest that he hadn't felt in a very long time. Humility. I have a board meeting in 5 hours, he said. It sounded stupid the moment he said it. Rose nodded without judgment. I can stay with him, if you need. My shift ends at 4. He'll be all right. You don't have to. I know, she said simply. Daniel's board meeting went for 3 hours. He sat at the head of a glass table in a room on the 40th floor while 12 executives in expensive suits talked about quarterly projections and market expansion. And the entire time, through every chart and every presentation and every question, he thought about a woman sitting cross-legged on a hotel room floor with his son, holding a smooth dark stone. When he returned to the suite at 7:14 p.m., he opened the door to find Ethan asleep on the sofa, covered with the hotel's extra blanket folded soft side up. His headphones still on, the stone clutched in his small fist. Rose sat in the armchair nearby, reading a worn paperback. A cup of tea on the side table. She looked up when Daniel entered. He ate, she said. The pasta. I warmed it up. He also, she smiled. He organized all the decorative stones from the bathroom dish by size. Then by color. Then by size again. Daniel laughed. It came out shaky and wet. He pressed the back of his hand against his eyes. I'm sorry, he said. I don't usually. You love him, Rose said simply. That's not something to apologize for. Before she left, Daniel tried to give her money. A lot of money. The number he said made her eyebrows rise slightly. She shook her head. Sir. Please, he said. For Marcus. For school, therapy, whatever he needs. Mr. Hargrove. Her voice was gentle but firm. I didn't do this for money. I did it because I know what it feels like to be alone. In a room with a child the world doesn't understand yet. She picked up her paperback from the chair. You can do something for me, though. Anything. She looked at him with steady, serious eyes. Learn what I did today. Not the tricks, the stones, the lighting, the cushions. You'll figure those out. Learn the patience underneath it. She paused. He doesn't need you to fix it. He just needs you to stay. She walked to the door. Rose, Daniel said. She turned. What's the stone for? Why did it work? She looked at the small sleeping shape of his son on the sofa. Then back at Daniel. It's nothing special, she said. I found it in a parking lot 3 years ago. Marcus he liked the weight of it. Something to hold on to when everything else feels like it's spinning. She paused. He can keep it. She smiled once more. Then she was gone. Daniel stood in the doorway of the suite for a long time after she left. Watching his son sleep, listening to the quiet city 40 floors below. He thought about everything he owned. Every floor of every building with his name on it. Every meeting, every merger, every million. The whole enormous architecture of his success. And then he thought about a woman who earned $14 an hour. And had figured out more about love than he had in 4 decades of living. He walked to the sofa. He sat on the floor beside it. His back against the cushions. Close to Ethan but not crowding him. He didn't check his phone. He didn't open his briefing folder. He just sat there in the amber light and listened to his son breathe. He doesn't need you to fix it. He just needs you to stay. For the first time in a very long time, Daniel Hargrove stayed. The next morning, Daniel called the hotel's general manager and requested that Rose Delgado be considered for the newly created position of guest experience specialist for families with special needs. A role that didn't exist yet but would. With a salary 4 times her current wage, full benefits, and a mandate to redesign every suite in the hotel to be sensory accessible. She accepted. Marcus got the therapy he needed. And Ethan, for his 8th birthday, received a jar of smooth stones in every color. He still has them.